Hey everybody, welcome back to Cola Down the Coast. I'm actually currently home right now and a little bit of a pause. Trip is not over. I'm only about a third of the way through the trip, using this as an opportunity to just kind of get some stuff done. But in the meantime, I wanted to give you guys a recap of days 8 through 10. So let's get right into it. So the night before, I had stayed in a hotel by Providence, Rhode Island, and I was ready just to get out of the state. I was pretty fresh from staying in the hotel, but the weather was supposed to be crappy that day, so I didn't know how things were going to go. So as soon as I got into Connecticut, I saw that it was going to thunderstorm, so I stopped under an underpass, and luckily I did, because it was pretty intense. So it continued to rain for most of the day, and actually pretty hard, but because it was relatively warm, it didn't really bother me that much, and I had some layers, so I was perfectly fine as long as it wasn't lightning. The one thing about the storm, though, was since I'd left my hotel a little bit later, and because I had to wait so long under the underpass, I was kind of behind that day, so I wasn't going to make that much miles. It did end up being an enjoyable day, but I didn't get as far as I'd like to. I think I only did about 50 miles that day. But overall, it was still a good experience, and I probably needed the day to kind of slow back and pull back a little bit, so I wasn't too upset about it. The one benefit was most of the climbing was this day, so I got it out of the way in a shorter ride. So here you can see how overflowed the rivers were. It was a lot of rain and it was really fast, and you could see it in how strong these currents were in these little rivers. So even though it continued to rain for most of the day, it did slow up as time went past, which made it a little bit easier to go on because there was a lot of descents. And with those descents, when it's raining really hard, you have to kind of sit on your brakes a little bit more. But as it cleared up, I was able to kind of bomb a little bit more, get a little bit more space. And even for a little bit, the sun popped out. I think it was maybe 10 minutes, but it started to get pretty warm, so it was nice. I did see in the forecast, though, that the storms were supposed to come back, so I didn't want to push my luck. So even though it was a little early in the day still, there was thunderstorms that were threatening, so I decided to actually end my day there. I ended up in a town called Willimantic. The one thing I hadn't done really well all day was eat, and I was starving. So I wanted to stop in a city where I could find some food, and luckily I did. And the food that I found was fantastic. Right up to the right over here, over this bridge, there was a little place called Latin Flavor. It was a local spot, and I actually had the time to talk to the woman who was running it. Her name was Vanna. She was wonderful. She was telling me her whole story and that she used to actually manage the place, and then she bought it. She wasn't even supposed to be open that day, but some unfortunate things happened to her, so she decided to get her mind off it and open. And luckily for me, I really enjoyed it. Get the pizza empanadas. They are fantastic. So because the day before was a little bit shorter, the next day I felt pretty fresh. The weather was nice. I was ready to go. To start off on the trail, it was pretty empty, except for there was this guy running, and he had his dog. At first, I wasn't sure about him because he was off the leash, but he wasn't going after me. I think he was just more checking me out. So it was actually pretty enjoyable to have a little escort for a little short time. He was pretty nice. I mean, the whole point of this trip is to support doggos like him, right? And nothing better than have an escort doggo. So like I was saying before, because I had the short day the day before, today I was feeling pretty good and the weather was great. What I didn't realize is everything else after this was just going to work out. It was just one of those days where nothing went wrong, everything was good, everything was in my favor, and I just did not feel any fatigue whatsoever. So my GPS was telling me that I had quite a bit of a climb to start the day, and because of that, I was trying to mentally prepare myself. And I guess maybe I overly mentally prepared myself because as I saw that it was coming up, I never really felt it. Even all the way to the top here, this is the highest point I got to, I kept asking myself, all right, where's the real climb coming? And it just didn't actually feel like it came. Maybe it was more subtle of a grade than I had had before. Maybe I was a little bit more conditioned from having all the hills in Maine. I don't know, but I never really actually felt it, and because of that, I think I had a little bit extra in the tank after. So once I got to the highest point for the day, and that was actually pretty early, everything else just went so smoothly. There was so much trail. It was downhill. I actually had wind at my back, I think, for most of the time. And on top of that, everything around me was gorgeous. Look at this. There's this tunnel that has like the rock action going around it. It was really cool to go through that. So as we're coming out of this tunnel, the rest of the day went so smooth. I don't know if it was the conditions, if I was more conditioned, if it was just me being in a good mood. There were still some climbs left, but I guess I was just so excited about the day going so well that I didn't even think about it. So because I wasn't mentally preparing myself anymore for the ride and the difficulty of it, I got to kind of mentally pull back and look at my surroundings more. And it was really nice to see the natural aspects of this trail and see how unique it was. I believe it was an old rail line, so it was really cool to see how they cut through the rock to get that going. Now, this part of the path is going towards Hartford, so it's a little bit more urban, but it was so much fun. These switchbacks, it was so fast. It felt like I was on a roller coaster. At times, I actually had to hit my brakes because I was going so fast. Now, this part wasn't as pretty as this section before, and it was right next to the highway, so it got pretty loud. But the actual trail itself was maintained really well, and it was so much fun. Now, this is the bridge going over into Hartford, and going through the city was pretty easy. There was plenty of space on this spot over the bridge. I took a shortcut onto a normal road, and they had bike lanes still on those roads, and people were generally pretty respectful. It was a good time. So this part right here, I think it's the Farmington Canal Trail. This may have been one of my best biking experiences ever. It went all the way from Hartford to the sea. It was so fast. It was so well maintained. And unfortunately, I don't really have that much video footage because I was so in the zone. I was locked in and I didn't have time to think about anything else. It was amazing. So the end of the trail goes through New Haven, which means it went through Yale. And Yale reminded me so much of Princeton, not only because it's an Ivy League school, but the area itself. You have all this wonderful old architecture, but surrounding it, you kind of had some less well-to-do areas. It was a pretty stark contrast. Again, these buildings were absolutely gorgeous, but right past these were pretty rough areas. It was kind of jarring to see how much investment they put in one specific area and then the other completely ignore it. But to be fair, that happens a lot in Jersey too. So once I was out of New Haven, the trail kept trying to push me towards the coast, which was perfectly fine, but it was doing it in a way that was kind of nonsensical and wasteful, and it really wasn't anything new. It was kind of feeling like the same coastline. They were nice areas, but I didn't need to see them over and over again.
Oh, no.
Now here's a warning for the kids.
Watch
Ball on the
yourself,
street,
okay?
Don't run after it. If I was a car, unfortunately that little girl would have been in a lot more trouble. So like I said, even though the path was kind of nonsensical, it gave me a chance to see some of the nicer things on the coast, including this little bridge that was pretty cool. It was just for pedestrians and the walkway. But overall, it still didn't make sense to keep weaving in and out. So we had talked about coastlines before, like New Hampshire was a little bit more rocky, and by Boston that had some beach but was mostly rocky. This was either one of two things, either direct coastline or a more traditional beach. So just up here, the path actually turned into a fully abandoned road. It used to be a roadway, but now it's just completely for bikes, which I guess is interesting. It was kind of weird. So I kind of gotten into this with talking about New Haven and Yale and some of the areas around it. But as I went along, I saw more of this big contrast between either working class or lower class areas and higher class. And they came back and forth a lot. So I'd be in an area that felt a little bit more rough. And then right after that were McMansions or huge houses. At one point, here you actually don't see any houses because they're set so far back so you can't see anything. It was really stark contrast. So again here, I had just come out of Bridgeport, which is more of a working class area, And now we're already backed up to houses with these huge columns up on the coast. It just kept changing so quickly. So at this point, my day turned into a 130-mile day because everything just worked out. But you know what? At this point, I did have to sleep. The sun was going down. I found a little spot, and I finally crashed. It was a wonderful day on the bike. Absolutely fantastic. But the next day was New York, and it was quite the opposite. So on my left, on the trail, I passed a guy on a scooter, and that was kind of a theme for things to come. It was just chaos after this. So there were trails, but it kind of felt like they were just created to be created. Like no one thought about how they functioned. They constantly kept crossing major roads, so for no reason, not for any efficiency reason. It kept creating points where I could get hit by a car. Like there was no reason why I had to keep crossing this street, but I did. And on top of that, it creates traffic for me. It creates more traffic for the cars. I did not understand it whatsoever. So this section might have been one of the worst parts of the entire ride. This was officially part of the route, but it was awful. There was no clear direction where to go. No one was paying attention. I had to weave in and out of people. There was things that were blocked off. There were so many times that people could have hit me. I hated this. I hated this so much, and it was just constant throughout the entire time I was in New York. This section here is actually the opposite of traffic. It told me specifically to go onto a sidewalk on a one-way that was the opposite direction of what I was doing. It was so sketchy, and everybody was in the way. It made no sense for me or for them. A little bit of dominoes action. That was cool, though. Now again, I have to go over across a busy street diagonally, so I have to have multiple contact points. There's buses everywhere, and there's no signage, and no one cares that I'm on my bike. It was absolutely awful. And don't get me started on the bike lanes. They were awful. Either someone was parked in them, they were blocked off, they were inaccessible. It made no sense. I can't tell you how many times I had to weave into traffic because I had to go around somebody in the bike lane. It doesn't make sense for me because now I'm in traffic and it's dangerous. It doesn't make sense for the people that are driving because they have less space to drive. Either have a bike lane and make it accessible or don't have it at all. And then you get people like this, that there is a pedestrian walkway right there, but because he's got a basket, he's in the bike lane and I have to go around him, and now I'm in traffic again. And this was supposed to be a bike, like highway road through New York. The road wasn't even a road. It was awful. It was all torn up. This was worse than a lot of the single track that I went through in the other states. And because it was still blocked off, not only was I dealing with the horrible road conditions, but now I'm in a major road that nobody wants me on. It was awful. Cars aren't waiting on me to go. I'm waiting on pedestrians to go. Pedestrians are waiting to see if the cars are going to hit them. Everybody's confused, and there's no right way to go. This is so disorganized. Again, the facilities exist. Like you see, there's bike lanes, but they don't function. They're just there to be there. And again, someone parked in the bike lane. Now I'm weaving between two trucks. It was terrible. You can physically hear the bike chattering because the road is so bad. Again, somebody else in the bike lane, unloading, I'm in traffic. Another cycle on the bike path. It was chaos. And another one. It just happened all day. I was so worried I was going to get hit by a cycle. Now I get it. It's a major city. There's going to be construction. There's going to be traffic. But not to the level of this. I've been through other cities like Rome or Boston, and yeah, there's definitely traffic and congestion and construction, but it wasn't the chaos level this was, or the confusion level this was, or the danger level. People were pretty chaotic in Rome, but at least they respected pedestrians. And here, there are beautiful parts of the trail. There's definitely investment happening, but a lot of it just felt like they built it to build it. This part was great, but this was very few and far between. Or here, it's quiet, it's open, it's nice, there's a view of the city, there's a bridge specifically for the bikes, which is amazing, but it's not utilized right. Here's another great example of how things could be. This is a recreational area, so there was nothing else going on around the area, and look how nice it is. And here's a perfect example of what I was talking about, them building things to just build things. This is a great part of the trail, but rather than choose to do the practical thing, they do the aesthetic thing. And they use bricks instead of pavement, and it was so bad to ride on. Or here, the path is so narrow, it's literally a one-way for a runner. If somebody was coming the opposite direction, we'd all be stuck. And just more of the construction. Again, I understand things didn't need to be repaired and fixed, but it was everywhere. There wasn't a spot where this wasn't happening. And finally, the detours. There was like 4 different times where the path was just completely blocked off, and there was no alternative to go around. My GPS was getting confused. Even Google Maps didn't know where to put me. It took me so long to get through the city just because I had to backtrack so many times. And my favorite part about New York City? Leaving it. I want to be clear, this is not an experience with the people. I actually had a few great conversations with people while I was there, but the people that are in charge of running the city and managing it need to do better, because this leaves me with no reason to want to come back. On a bright note, I was able to use the ferry to get back, and I love the boats. I love the views from the ferry. New York City is a really beautiful place to look at. It's just not pretty to be in it. It's very difficult. At this point, I was just really excited to end my day, and I was extra excited that I got to do it on my own home routes, the trails that I got to ride every single day. I just kept thinking about, wow, I just rode my bike from the Canadian border to my house. I didn't even think this was possible. The other thought I had was, I'm not even halfway done. But I was excited to sleep in my own bed, to make my own meals, to go grab a shower. I was just finally ready to slow down for a little bit. And here I am, coming up to my house. And to say that I was ready to come home was the understatement of the century. We're back, baby. And that about wraps it up for days 8 through 10. In a few days, I'm going to be heading out to continue on my trip. Before I go, there is one thing I want to mention. There have been a few people that have reached out to me and offered a place for me to stay. And for that, I'm really appreciative. If anybody else is on the way down and willing to host me, I did want to mention that in the link that I have provided below, there is a link to my email. You can send me your information, and I would be more than willing to take you up on that. So, with that, until next time, see you further down the coast.